After the Aaron Glenn hire, the Jets went on a little bit of a hiring spree with Darren Moogie for GM, Steve Wilks as DC, Chris Banjo as the special teams coach, and Steve Heiden as the OL coach. We are going to talk about it now.
Hey, New York Jet fans from all around the world. Welcome to Laugh Through the Turbulence, a New York Jets podcast. The show that delivers you all your Jets content. Here are your hosts, John, Adam, and Monty. All the best to the New York Jet fans. Jets, Jets, go Jets.
Yeah. And
what's up, everybody?
Much the full crew is back after a week of work trips for Monty. Yep. Now I got a work trip coming up, so we try to squeeze this in before. But yeah, and I guess we obviously the Aaron Glenn news is old news, and we all really do like the hire. So we're not going to talk too much about that, although it's going to kind of blend with a lot of these other hires that just happened this last week and change, right? The first one is obviously we've got a GM now, Darren Moogie. He comes from the Broncos. He was originally a player, had a cup of coffee, as they would say in the NFL, and then basically worked his way up the Broncos system. Scout. I guess he has a ring too, in theory, right? He does have a ring.
Yeah, with the Peyton Manning Broncos, right?
Yeah, he does, because he's been with the organization long enough, and he kind of worked his way up. And honestly, this is a name that we really didn't see coming, right? Like
no one did.
No one kind of did. And I mean, there's not too much information on him except that I guess I read Nania's article, right? Mm-hmm. And it kind of echoed that he's more analytical than Joe is in terms of his philosophy. Joe Douglas was more of an eye test guy, right? There's no question on that one.
Yeah.
But he's definitely more analytical, right? And also the one thing that I believe it was Nania's article that he pointed out was that, like, basically there's not a hard cutoff for a lot of prospects in his scouting whatever process, right? So, like, let's say if a guy doesn't have like long enough arms, and that's usually a hard no for teams, they'll look at everything else to see if that really doesn't trend up for the next level, right?
Okay.
So there's little, and those things kind of make sense, right? Like, so, like, for example, like Fashion, who has like smaller hands, he probably has smaller hands than me, although he's a big man, right? But I have very large hands. The ladies like.
So do I.
Not me. My hands are small.
Okay. But anyway, like, he's still a great blocker, right? AVT has short arms, right? But when he's healthy, he's one of the best.
Solid,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. John Simpson, he has some traits that are not great, right? But he played like he could have been a Pro Bowler had the Jets had a better season. You know what I mean? Because he was top 10 on both sides of the run and pass, right? So, like, he might be Joe Douglas's best signing outside of DJ Reed, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely up there. I mean, Joe Douglas had a very rocky record with signings and acquisitions. So, but yeah, that definitely was one of his better ones. I hope we'll definitely keep that line together, especially now that loser Keith Carter is gone.
Yeah, and I think, like,
most improved coach by far, most improved coach.
It doesn't matter. I'm going
from an F to a C minus doesn't matter.
Yeah, an F minus to an F. Like, it's not really anything that I think we should even be discussing.
Honestly, even if he went from a F minus to a C minus, I still don't want him. I don't want him.
I don't know how you can say the Jets O line was that.
But I don't think it was attributed to him. They improved talent wise, and they were healthy.
Yes, it's more health and talent than Keith.
Yeah, more health.
I'll buy that. I'll give him a C. I'll give him a C.
Also, let's not forget that Rodgers had one of the fastest releases in the NFL last year. So he was getting that ball out there. He was throwing a lot. So it's not like they had a ton of time to be sacking him. Like, they sacked him, a good amount, but, they didn't have the time to, like some other teams. He's not running around dancing, doing all that stuff.
Yeah, no, I think I think kind of bringing you back to Moogie, though, I think like there are things that I definitely like about the hire. I'm going to be honest, I like that he's 39. It's good to get a little bit younger. I think that kind of does bring more of just a modern feel to things.
Agreed.
The fact that he is analytically inclined, I think really helps. The fact that he's been around George Payton, who's a really good, general manager. He's worked up through the ranks. He's worked in scouting. He's done a bunch of different things. He's worked with Sean Payton. I think all of these things are really, really positive traits. Now, he's never had final say on anything. He's never had to make a tough call. So a lot of these things, we'll see how it goes. But if you're looking for traits, I think this is a pretty strong hire, especially considering how Denver has done kind of the opposite of what Joe Douglas did. And they've been able to hit on players in the later rounds in the draft, right? If you look at their last drafts, they've brought in players that are highly productive, that have come on, day 2, day 3, which is something I think this team, I think we all agree, really needs to get better at, and I don't want to say anyone can do it because there are a lot of busts in the first round, but I think a lot of Douglas's picks were kind of like, 9 out of 10 people are making that pick, right?
It's not a Will McDonald.
So I think like this will
it's
be.
Not a Will McDonald. Let's just be real on that one. Like, you could say he was right on it. You could say he was right.
Right. So, you can give him one, but most of them, right, you're going to say most people would have made that pick. But nevertheless, I think that this is a good start. I think it's also good that him and Glenn do have some kind of history, because they need to work together in lockstep. So I think that they're off to a pretty good start here. Obviously, none of this matters until we see what happens in free agency and the draft. But I think you can start to be, a little optimistic in the direction that they're going. One thing I also do want to say, don't know how much weight it carries, but after the introductory press conferences, Woody did say, I need to look in the mirror. I need to be a better owner, and Aaron Glenn looks like he's kind of the guy in charge, which is important in terms of building the culture and setting things the way, the franchise needs them to be. So all in all, I think, a couple of solid hires, and we'll see how it progresses.
Yeah. So, just to kind of, echo some of the things you said, but also bring a little different perspective. First of all, this is a 33rd team hire. We got Tannenbaum and we got Spielman, and that's really what these guys were brought in to do, is hire the GM. Any fan could look around and see the available coaches and be like, yeah, Aaron Glenn, you know what I mean? Like that, or Flores, we could have picked
those are the four.
We could have picked, but the point is we could have picked the head coaches fairly easily, but to dig a hire like this from, we don't know really about the assistants and about, AGMs and what their roles were and, et cetera. Like, guys, I like the fact that we have 2 former successful GMs making this kind of a hire. So, there's that. And that's definitely a big point that I think is worth mentioning that we need to keep in mind at this hire. A lot of Jets fans are out there like, who the hell is this guy? Never heard of him, blah, blah, blah. But, it doesn't really matter because, they did, they had a lot to say about him. And one of the things that like Tannenbaum said is that, you kind of you can judge a lot of these guys by how people who, can't help them, or how they treat people who can't help them, and how those people turn around and compliment them when they're not around. So apparently, they had a lot of it was a data-driven hire, and apparently they had a lot of data points of, Moogie being kind of spoken highly about, Aaron Glenn too, but Moogie being like a lot of guys being very high on Moogie, that, guys that had been cut, guys that had been, maybe traded, guys that, had no reason to really talk highly of him, spoke highly of him. So there was a lot of data points on that. I guess that's weighted heavily. I guess that matters. But on the good side, strong scouting background. I mean, over a decade with the Broncos. He worked his way all the way up to AGM. I mean, that's pretty impressive. He survived multiple different, kind of regimes there, in Denver. And that's kind of a admirable thing, because a lot of times the old guy gets kicked out, they throw the baby out with the bathwater and they clean house. He knows what it's like to build a competitive roster. I mean, look what Denver's doing this year. He saw that get built. He saw how important it is to have good coaching, how important it is to have, good defense, good QB play, all these different things. And, they were able to, help get this franchise into a very, competitive state. He's worked under, like Adnan mentioned, successful GMs like Peyton. It remains to be seen how he'll work with Aaron Glenn, and which is a segue into kind of the negative side, which is he's inexperienced and Glenn is inexperienced as far as at their current roles. So that to me is something that's a little bit, not ideal. Now, if I have to pick from all the guys with no experience, like obviously these are two of the best, I would say. But it still needs to be said and needs to be watched that, both of the leadership candidates that are going to be steering this ship for the foreseeable future are not, very experienced guys. Denver's also had some mixed results, solid defense, but they struggled at their long-term quarterback solution, really. I mean, Nick's, I guess. I mean, Nick's looks okay now.
Nick's is good now. Good,
but I mean, we'll see what he's like next year, and but since Peyton Manning, they haven't really had a good QB out there in Denver, and he's part of that. He's part of that inability to to get that. Now, quarterback is an extremely hard position to nail in the NFL. I get that, but again, it's still, and then also it's like, how's he going to handle the pressure? Is he going to be, is he going to be like Joe D and hide and cower and you're never going to see his face? Or is he someone that we're going to see a little bit more of? We'll see how that works out. Is he going to let Glenn be the face? I mean, which might be a good idea because Glenn has already, in my opinion, shown that he can handle this New York, media. So, all in all, good hires, but there are definitely some significant question marks. Especially like what Adnan said about not having a track record of like major trades or acquisitions.
Well, let me just say one thing, right? Usually the guys that have experience in these roles do not, if they're good, they keep them, right? So that's like one thing, right? So like you can't
that's fair.
There's an argument to be made like, hey, give someone a shot that hasn't failed at it yet, right? And had it, right? So like obviously like I don't know, like let's say Dimitrov, for example, right? Like an event like that was probably our favorite GM candidate, right? Because it was just like the track record, long success as GM, right? Proved out, and then he fizzled out. But the guy never got another fucking job, right? And like there has to be a reason for it, and there has to be a reason why he didn't take this one, right? Or we didn't offer it to him, right? There's that, and then I guess like Newmark was also interesting. That was the name I thought was going to be the pull on the trigger, right? And like also didn't have experience, but there's stuff. Once again, as I said this during the year too, we don't know all these conversations. We can only really speculate on them, right?
Yep.
Because that's just the nature of, I guess, the back off the front office business, right? We don't know everything that happens. Like, we didn't know about the Jerry Jeudy thing until way after, right? With Joe Douglas and Saleh, wanting to bring in and all the bullshit that came in after that, right? And we ended up with Mike Williams, and we were like, yeah, we got Mike Williams, but no, he had Jerry Jeudy in mind, right? Who ended up being a Pro Bowler, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, and then you question like all the other things too, like what happened to John Franklin Myers, that was Joe Douglas's guy, right? Like was Joe Douglas said like, hey, let's get rid of John Franklin Myers and bring in Hassan Reddick, or was that Woody's ear in that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, you
Good
know, so
point.
like we just don't know a lot of this, and it sucks. I mean, I would love to be a fly on the wall in all this, but the 33rd team, right? It's good that we did that process, right?
Oh, yeah.
Guys did all the investigations they probably did. It's probably a bigger investigation than like some of the draft picks and how they get investigated during the draft process, right? So I mean, the only thing that we don't like about these guys is we just don't know how they're gonna perform in these roles, right? That's pretty much it at this point, right?
Right.
So I guess we'll see. Adnan, before we move to the next hire, do you want to add anything to it or no?
No, I think you're right. I think you made, that's a good point. We don't know what goes into these conversations, and we don't know, right, what happened with Lance Newmark from when it seemed like he was going to be the guy, and then
they're
after
comparable.
that,
They're comparable to me, to be honest.
yeah,
Different, you know.
Everyone's different, right? And I think like when you go with Muga, I think a lot of it, just to speculate, right? Maybe it was Glenn's comfort with him, right? I mean, Glenn was comfort with Newmark also because he was in Detroit when Glenn was there. So, there are a lot of things that go into it. But I think that, now what we do is we just kind of cross our fingers. Yes, are there concerns? Of course. I think with any hire, there's going to be a concern unless you're, hiring Andy Reid a week after he gets fired or, whatever the case may be. But I think there is room for optimism, which is the most important thing, right? We're not looking at these hires and saying, "Oh, this is a disaster," So I think,
Right.
I think that's a positive thing to look at. That it looks like they're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting there, but we'll see.
Yeah, of course. Everything depends on production, right? But I think initial returns we can be, cautiously optimistic about the moves.
Sure.
You know what sucks? We were probably 1 year away from having the opportunity to hire fucking Andy Reid, if you really think about it. Yeah. I'm doing the math now. Like Rex had the down year after the 2 back-to-back AFC championship games, right? And then I guess another bad year, right? Because he got fired after the 2014 season. Reid got hired in 2013. We're just 1 year away from the what if, right? And like, if you had fired Rex then for 2013, Jets' job was actually pretty good standing at that point, right? It was, right? Realistically, like,
they had most of their.
They had the defense.
They had most of their team there. Yeah.
And I think a guy like Reid would have kind of reveled in trying to work with and fix Sanchez, young quarterback. So yeah, I think it would have been interesting, but that ship has sailed. So
yeah, we decided to go bring in Tim Tebow, right?
Yeah, perfect.
So total Jets move.
You want to move on to the next hire, John?
Yeah, sure. So this was interesting because Aaron Glenn did mention he'd like to hire a DC that also had head coach experience, and he actually got that right here. Steve Wilks, DC, who's a former head coach for Arizona. Did not do well there, right? And has been a DC for a couple teams, including Panthers team that went to the Super Bowl and lost, right? That's kind of how he springboarded his job there, right? Then he was a DC for Cleveland.
The Chargers, or defensive backs coach for the Chargers, yeah.
Yeah. Went to Cleveland, and that team was a disaster. I think that was the 0-16 season. I could be wrong. I think it was, though. It was before I think it was right with, or maybe it was the year after that, but that was the Hugh Jackson regime, and that kind of just dissolved, right? Because Hugh Jackson was really not made to be a coach, right? And then after that, he went back to San Francisco as their DC, and he got fired after the Super Bowl they lost in OT.
And then he sat 2024 out.
Yeah, and he was doing something else for some offspring team, and I guess he was available. So Aaron Glenn liked him enough, clearly, to hire, right? And here we are, right? What do you guys think of Steve Wilks, though?
I mean, I think he has I think he's kind of shown an ability to develop players. I mean, he's had teams that that have done well. He's been to a Super Bowl. He's definitely got the experience. I think he can mentor. I think he can do the things that we need, a defensive coordinator to do. I'm just a little shaky about the whole, the 2023, Niners season. Although, if I do remember correctly, they did turn over the ball they were generating a lot of turnovers that year. If I'm not mistaken, I have to double check that. But in any case, as long as he can help this team, help Sauce, tackle better and help, generate some actual interceptions for once. I'm with it. I do like the fact that he has head coaching experience. So if something were to happen with Glenn, we're not relying on someone like Ulbrich. We're relying on someone who's actually head coached a team before. I think he can lend that knowledge to a first-time coach like Glenn. I think it's really good to have someone in your corner who's done it before. I think that's good for Aaron Glenn. That's a good pairing, especially with Glenn being a defensive guy. So there's definitely some positives there. But well, I'm really 50-50 on this one, man. I gotta say, because he's got the experience, he's got some background, but then the way he left San Fran, and then the way that the Cleveland debacle went, I don't know. He's got some dings on his record too.
Well, hear me out on the at least his record, right? So Carolina helped develop Luke Kuechly, and I'm about to sneeze again, which I fucking hate. Josh Norman had his best season under him, and then downhill. Oh my God, hang on. All right, I'm gonna hold it in. Okay, and then Cleveland, I guess they drafted Myles Garrett, right? Mm-hmm. Or they had Myles Garrett and they developed him, right? And then San Francisco, I mean, he still has that DC job if Greenlaw doesn't get hurt.
Yeah, bless you, John. So one thing, just to address the record also, one of the things, so if you look at the Cardinals, right, he had a rough first year as their head coach. They ended up with a first-round pick. They fired him because they wanted to pair Kyler Murray with Cliff Kingsbury, right? So, was that a Steve Wilks issue, or was it more of an issue that, we have this quarterback, if we can get his guy here with him, then we have to do something like that, right? Also, keep in mind, Steve Wilks in 2022, he was the interim coach for the Panthers, where he went on a little bit of run there, and he was really in consideration to keep that head coaching job, right? And then kind of the talk about the stuff you were talking about, Monty, with his stats. This is from the Jet Press. They tweeted this out. 49ers defensive ranks under Steve Wilks in 2023. Total defense 8th, rushing defense 3rd, passing defense 14th, scoring defense 3rd, interceptions 2nd, sacks 3rd, and then their PFF grade was tied for 1st, coincidentally with the Jets. Right? So I think when you look at this from a defensive coordinator perspective, I think he has a lot of positive momentum there. Now, the 49er thing, him and Shanahan didn't get along. It happens, right? And I think coming into something like this with Glenn, one of the things that he seems like he's really good at is setting expectations and being able to kind of communicate with people. I think there's going to be an understanding of what the relationship is, what his responsibility is, and having head coach experience is kind of perfect for a first-time head coach in Aaron Glenn. So I know that there are some concerns in terms of, why hasn't he been able to hold down a job for a long time? But I think when you really dig into it, there are some really kind of tangible reasons as to why those things didn't happen. And looking at his last defensive coordinator role, he's aggressive. And that's kind of what I want. I want aggressive. And so I'm willing to take this chance, and I think it's a really good hire. You could have done a lot worse than Steve Wilks.
Yeah, I think of the hires, I think as DC, I might be more confident in that hire for that role than Aaron Glenn at that role and Moogie at that role, if that makes sense. Just because there's a lot of experience there. Clearly, he's had a leadership role, even though it didn't work out as head coach the first time. Second time, you could argue he should have kept that role. Well, the Panthers now looks like they found their quarterback towards the end of the year, right? But I mean that I feel like maybe he grew up a little bit, so like he probably could have been an HC, again, but maybe not a great option for some teams.
Yeah, I just like we have some fucking adults in the room now.
Yeah, he's an adult.
He's an adult. We have adults in the room now. We don't have losers like Hackett, Keith Carter, all these bums that couldn't hack it at other places and came over here just because we needed to fill positions.
What do you think Hackett's gonna do next? I'm just curious.
Oh, dude, if he gets an NFL job, it's only because somebody owed his dad a favor.
Well,
after his past few stops, like after the disaster in Denver,
he should be coaching high school. Like out of
you want him developing high school kids? He should be cleaning the field out of high school. Like one other thing that I like though to get back to like these guys, and maybe this is just me, I like that Glenn and Moogie, the Steve Heiden, they're former players. Like I think that's really important for like where this culture is. That these guys can come in and say, guys, I've been there. I know what you're going through. Nobody on that Jet staff could really do that.
Yeah, Sala wasn't a player.
Hackett wasn't a player.
Hackett wasn't a player.
Downing was a player. I don't think Carter was a player, or maybe very low level, right? So I think this is good just from the perspective of, hey, man, listen, I feel you. I've been there. I know what you're going through. And I think that can help these young players like kind of get out of the rut they've been in over the past couple of years.
Yeah, because clearly the Jets get into these ruts and like, all right, so like, let's go back to 2022, 6-game losing streak at the end of the year, right? When there was a borderline case they were going to make the playoffs with Zach Wilson leading the helm in his second year, right? Like, I think we were like 5-2 at one point, and then 7-4 going into that Minnesota game and like with Mike White, and they almost pulled it off, right? Even though they started off pretty bad. And you could argue that was a terrible call to Barrios that year. God, I hated that so much. They got into a rut, right? And then last year they had spurts of ruts, and then eventually it started to come up a little bit at the end, right? And this year, clearly, was a fucking rut, I mean, like, yeah, there was a massive rut, right? Yeah. So, okay. So, we're good with that. And that actually translates now to our next hire, Chris Banjo, who was a player as well. And he's their special teams coach, and he comes from the Broncos. He was the assistant special teams coach there. So, that's an interesting hire. It is special teams. So it doesn't have as big of a priority, but it's still an important position, right?
Jets special teams was atrocious, so I think
it was correct.
I think any kind of improvement, the bar is not high for him to improve, and I think between him and with Glenn's leadership, I think it's I'm not gonna lie, I don't know a ton about Chris Banjo. I do like that he's a player, but other than that, I'm just excited to have someone else.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I'm liking also about just the hires in general, no holdovers, right? Like Brant Boyer is gone, and he survived a few coaching staffs, so he's gone. Obviously, Carter's gone. Like these guys, they're just starting fresh, which I really like. One of the things about Banjo, though, that's really interesting, again, he former player, he played for Aaron Glenn when Glenn was with the Saints. He comes very highly recommended, not just from Sean Payton, but from Mike Westhoff as well. So I think like Westhoff is a guy who's a special teams god, right? So if he's giving his stamp of approval on somebody, I think that's that's a good thing as well. And yeah, I mean, just a change up of these guys that have been here for a while, I think is a really good thing. And we'll see how it plays out. But I appreciate the fact that Glenn, I think, is making pretty thoughtful hires, kind of the opposite of what Saleh kind of did, right? With bringing and Hackett, we know why they hired him, but just keeping Brant Boyer and doing these kind of things that just kind of didn't make sense. So I appreciate that Glenn and Moogie are kind of moving in this direction.
I will say this about Banjo. He was a teammate of Aaron Rodgers at one point.
Interesting. I did not know that. That's a good thing too, I guess.
Yeah, especially because if he takes a pay cut, we might keep him.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, God, we don't even know how that's going to work out yet, right? Because I guess the whole staff is still being hired. And, I think the QB's coach was interviewed from the Commanders, assistant QB's coach, too. But, we won't say anything on that. I mean, that'll be very interesting just because, they did great with Jade Daniels, right? You can't have a better rookie year as a quarterback, right?
Right.
But
is that the QB coach or is that?
Yeah, we don't know. Or is it Cliff Kingsbury? You know
wow.
what I mean? We no one fucking knows, man. We're not in those rooms. But we got another hire too as well. We got Steve Heiden as OL coach, who knows Aaron Glenn. He was the tight ends coach, and he's getting an up. I guess this is an upgrade, right? In terms of hiring, right? It's not lateral to go from tight ends coach to OL coach, right? So
right.
That's interesting too, but that's also interesting for tight ends because the run game, that was the one thing that this O-line was supposed to be run focused, right? And the tight ends that we have last year, that was not they're not run blockers, right? Rutger really went downhill on the blocking, right? Conklin was never really known for being a run blocker.
Right.
Actually, Uzama was the best run blocking tight end that we had, even though he had a couple notable holding calls that really, I guess, hit the eye test, right, for a lot of casual fans, right? But he was the best run blocking tight end that we had, right? So, but I don't know, I think it's interesting, right? Because the tight ends are going to be part of the blocking scheme next year, and who knows what the hell's going to happen too. I mean, now Samini even said hey, Brees might be in the trade block too, which actually would make a lot of sense given that our running backs are pretty deep, right? And who knows if they're going to pay Brees, and this is a very weak running back free agency class. So,
but the draft is loaded.
Yes, the draft is loaded at running back, and it's also loaded at that tight end position too. Yep. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I like the hire. I think that you get a guy, he's familiar with Glenn, which I think is important. He learned under Hank Fraley, who's one of the best offensive line coaches in the NFL. This guy has always wanted to be an offensive line coach, so I think giving that opportunity is something that he'll be grateful for. Learning under Ben Johnson, he was in the room with a lot of really smart people. So I think that really helps. And again, it's a breath of fresh air. Someone we don't really know, somebody that is already an upgrade over Keith Carter. That's just hands down. So.
Yeah, it's kind of nice because it's like dating a new girl, right? It's like dating a new girl, right? Each position on the each Jets position group is dating a new woman, essentially, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
New smell, new taste,
But also but it's also you gotta hope that these hires aren't just good the first 6 weeks, and then you're like, what did I do?
Right. They got to gel with each other too. That's another thing. That's the one thing about cleaning house that is kind of tough is that, you clean house, you get all this new blood in here, but sometimes that new blood ain't all the same blood type. And then you have some issues there.
Team, our Jets team, even with all the free agents that we have, and mostly they're on the defensive side of the ball, there's still so much fucking talent on this team.
Well, I think that's right. And I think also, everything has to gel, right? The players, the coaching staff, everything. So I think it's good that, they've brought in someone, again, that Glenn is familiar with on the offensive side. It looks like it's trending towards Tanner Engstrand, who's going to be the offensive coordinator, who's the passing game coordinator for the Lions right now. So, if he comes in, you have his new offensive line coach that's familiar with him. So you're starting to build some continuity on the offensive staff, right? And I think you look at a guy like Wilks, he's been coaching for so long. He probably he has thousands of relationships that he can leverage to find guys that he can bring in to build him.
Yeah.
No, and Glenn has been coaching for a while and been in the NFL. So I think all of these things combined will lend to a strong staff in terms of what the Jets need. And then we'll see what happens. But again, all of these moves, I think, give us room for cautious optimism. I'm not looking at any of them and saying this is a disaster, like when they brought in Keith Carter or when they hired Hackett, all of that.
Yeah.
So, that's the one positive thing. I can look at these and say, Heiden may be an unknown, but he's been with a lot of smart people.
There's no red flags yet.
Yeah, nothing.
Right. And another player. I don't know if we point that out yet. Another player.
And play too?
Yeah. He played for 10 years.
He played for the Chargers as a tight end.
Blocking tight end also. So he's kind of like, one of those guys. So I think it's a very
white coach so far.
Yeah, well, I wasn't.
I didn't know.
It's funny. I wasn't going to say it, but I knew you were going to say it, so I kind of waited for you, John.
It would have been better if you did, given that I am the white guy, and anything I say involving race is always raised with the eyebrow and the compliance.
But it's funnier that way.
Yeah,
but anyway, I mean, it's like it's cool. We switch it up a little bit. Let's give the brothers a chance.
Exactly. Listen, I'm Muslim, right? The Muslim culture, the white guys didn't work out. So let's
oh, true. Yeah. You guys got your chance now. It's
Yeah, we had our chance. So
it's not like track record's been that bad. I mean, Todd Bowles wasn't great for us, but now he's been solid on the Bucs. I mean,
speaking of Bowles, really quick, I just want to pivot to something that I find very interesting. The Niners hired Saleh and Brent Boyer. Right? Like, that's curious. Saleh, I get. But Boyer, I'm just like, man, the special teams wasn't that good. How does that guy keep getting jobs? I don't understand.
To be fair with the Jets special teams unit this year, right? So we lost Justin Hardy, right? We lost him, and he was a Pro Bowl special teams player, right? We didn't get him back. So that was like a lot of the coverage stuff. That's probably what went wrong there, right? Morstead actually had a down year, but that kind of makes sense because he's getting up there in age, right? And Greg the Leg just disappeared, right?
Well, I mean,
and those are your three biggest things for special teams units, right?
To rebut that a little bit, right? You can't stay with Xavier Gibson as long as you did, right? You and I know this maybe wasn't entirely on Boyer, but he had to do a better job of telling them we got to keep Codrington somehow to be our kick returner. He was very good for Buffalo, right?
Yeah.
Like, so these are things that I look at and I'm like, man, I mean, Irv Charles was good. He was a pretty good replacement for Hardy. So I think that that's part of the special teams coach. Like, you can't lose a guy like Hardy and then well, nothing I can do. We lost Hardy.
Right, but Hardy, I'm just saying, Hardy was like an expensive special teams guy that was hired on purpose, right? That's just he was like, you knew he was a Pro Bowl caliber special teams guy. Got it. That just sounds weird, right? That you just actively look for that. But that's I'm just saying, you knew what you were getting out of Hardy was a little bit of an unknown, but I hear what you're saying, Adam.
So it's just interesting to me, but I feel like with a strong season or two in San Francisco, Saleh could have a Todd Bowles type career arc, because I think he knows what he did wrong, and if he can build on those things, he might have a chance. Also, just to kind of talk about the former guys again, did you guys happen to see what Ulbrich said in his press conference when he was brought in as a defensive coordinator in Atlanta?
No, he's dead to me.
He said some really interesting things. I think he was very honest and had some self-reflection on things he could have done better. And so, I hope these guys are successful, except when they play the Jets. But it's
I don't feel
interesting.
bad. I don't feel bad about Ulbrich at all, man. I mean,
Oh, no, I'm not saying I
feel bad for him. I feel bad for him.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean. But I think it says something that those guys got hired immediately. They're good football coaches. It was just a terrible situation.
The defensive side mostly, right? Which makes sense, right? Because Ulbrich, like, we were talking about this, like, going into this season. Like, we were probably going to lose Ulbrich after this year for a head coaching job, right? Because the Jets defense had been PFF's #1 defense for 2 years straight, right?
Right, exactly.
And now we know that it was just Saleh, right?
Yeah.
Pretty much, right? And because even when Saleh was there and before he got fired, they were still a top 5 PFF.
Yeah,
unit,
and they made
Darnold look fucking stupid, right? In the UK game, right? Bo Nix beat us 10-9. Had one fucking drive that was worth writing home about, and everything else was just zip, right?
Yeah. Just
Patriots got destroyed. Will Levis had some moments, and then they woke up. Yeah,
I mean, and so we can rehash, the whole season, of course. But I think, like, just interesting that those guys landed on their feet. Like, all three of them, the head coach, the special teams coordinator, and the defensive coordinator, all got roles relatively soon, which is good for them. Hackett, should never coach football again. I'm interested to see what happens with Downing, because I don't think he's a horrific coach. I think there's room for him somewhere on some staff. Maybe Vrabel brings him in and tries to rehabilitate him, but I will say Vrabel is building a hell of a staff.
Yeah.
And so that's something that we kind of have to, contend with as well.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Downing will end up on some team where it doesn't really matter who the passing game coordinator is because the quarterback's probably good enough to carry it.
Exactly.
And between the QB and the OC, they'll just figure it out. Passing game coordinator will just kind of, be there for show or whatever. Like, that's the kind of role I see, being, and it's crazy that you can get a job like that at that level,
Right. Yeah, but no, definitely interesting, and I think cautiously optimistic. I think is going to be the motto for this offseason, right? Because after all of the high expectations and everything, I think we got to take everything with a grain of salt. Everything that happens, have to be honest about and be willing to look at both sides of everything. So I'm cautiously optimistic, but we'll see.
Yeah, and then circling back to Heiden, real quick, just it's just I think he's got some potential, some bright spots. He's got some good experience. I mean, he's got a good amount of coaching experience, a good amount of playing experience, but I'm a little nervous about like kind of the mixed bag experience. Like, he's a tight end guy. He's an offensive, he was an O-line assistant, coach. Like, so he's kind of had a mixed bag, but I would have liked for him to, have been an O-lineman and, have had more experience as an O-line coach.
Hand of the dirt.
Something like that, you know what I mean?
Hand of the dirt, Monty. Say hand of the dirt.
Yeah, well, I think, Monty, I agree. I know exactly where you're coming from, and it's completely valid, right? But I will also say there is a lot of value in playing as a blocking tight end, right?
Sure.
And like that was his thing. Like, if they hired a guy like Antonio Gates to be the offensive line coach, and I'd be like, I don't know about this, but
right.
A little bit. And I think that you got to give people chances. And also, how many offensive line coaches were out there that we would say, yeah, this is the guy? So I think, like, I'd rather have a little bit of an unknown than Keith Carter. You know what I'm
Sure.
saying?
Listen, absolutely. I'm not saying he's a bad choice. I'm just saying he's kind of like, I would have preferred a little more experience and a little bit more of a background, as an O-lineman coach, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be bad. And honestly,
Do you want
listen,
Heiden's blocking grades from the 4 years that we have in PFF? Do you want them?
let's hear him.
They're fucking excellent. They're fucking excellent. I mean, guess the tight end, right? I only have the Cleveland years because I guess 2006 is when PFF started doing everything, right? But basically, I'll do run, then pass.
Sure.
06, 74, 77.
Okay, very good.
And that's basically 100. And every one of these years has almost 100 run blocking snaps to it. Some of these have almost 300, right? And then the pass blocking, they go up, right? Anyway, 2007, 280 to 80 run to pass blocking snaps, 72, 79. The next year, 262 run block, 55 pass block, a 94, and a 73-7. And then the final year, this is probably the year that he got hurt. It looks like he got hurt. He definitely got hurt. Okay. He had 148 run blocking snaps and 17 pass blocking, 86 and 77 grades. And
very good.
He's only credited in 242 pass blocking snaps with giving up 1 sack and 10 pressures.
That's good for him, man. Listen, I definitely think he's got some experience there. I'm not saying he's an NFL player that played on the O-line as a tight end. So he's got some experience there. I'm just saying I would have preferred an O-lineman, and I would have preferred someone who had more experience as an O-line assistant. Not necessarily more of a tight end than a tight end guy. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. I mean, he could. Everyone has to start somewhere, and maybe he might be the guy that we hit on. Yeah,
and listen, it's a little bit out of the box, right? But maybe that's what this franchise needs because doing shit by the book hasn't worked at all. So.
Yeah. Cool.
And there were no other hires, I guess, right?
No, we're still waiting on that OC.
Yeah.
Maybe
that's what I'm waiting on more than anything else is a freaking OC hire.
That OC will tell you a lot about Aaron Rodgers. I guess in reality, that OC is going to be the one that really determines.
The OC is going to tell Aaron Rodgers about the future of the team. Like the OC is arguably probably the most important coaching assistant hire, of all of them.
No, 100%. 100%.
Yeah, I don't think
especially when you have a defensive coach.
And right? I think it's not even close. You have a defensive rookie coach. You need a solid OC. You need someone, and I don't know who they're going to plug in that role, but time's ticking.
It's going to be run or pass philosophy too.
Time's ticking. Yeah. God, I just hope we don't go back to the same old defensive ground and pound Jets. Like I'm sick of that. Can we be high flying Jets for once? We're a fucking airplane. Why are we obsessed? Why are we obsessed with ground and pound? Where our logo is an airplane.
But here's what I would say, man. Like the thing about Glenn though is like, who did he really learn under? Sean Payton, who's an offensive genius. Dan Campbell, an offensive guy, and Ben Johnson. Like, he's not. Rex Ryan came from the Ravens, where all they do is run the ball, right? Like, all these guys came from places where even Saleh coming from San Francisco, they run the football. So I think Denver. I think Sean Payton and Ben Johnson and Dan Campbell, those influences on Aaron Glenn. I think that will lend to something more of a modern offense, right?
I hope so.
I will say this though, real quick, to counter the need to be a passing offense. The best teams this year were run first.
It's funny you said so. The top 6 rushing teams all made the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
right? So yeah, being able to run the ball is really important. But I do understand what Monty is saying.
Look,
right?
and Saquon, he talked
I mean, the
that. He
Super
was
Bowl
like,
teams
we
are
want
run
to
first
show,
teams right now.
yeah,
The
yeah.
Super Bowl teams are run first.
Saquon said, we want to show we can run it down your throat and still get to the Super Bowl. But the fact that he felt the need to say that just kind of tells you where the league's been going, where the league's at, generally speaking, what teams have been trying to do. Obviously, running the ball is a little bit more direct, not necessarily easier, but more direct than a passing game. But it's just, I'm just talking also from not just also from where the league's going, but just from a personal standpoint. I've seen that type of a Jets team my whole life. And now I just want to see a Jets team that comes and just slings that shit effectively. Like this year with Aaron Rodgers throwing the ball more times than any other quarterback, but it wasn't effective. You know what I mean? And it's like we hire Adam Gase as a coach, and he wasn't effective.
Let me do this real quick. All right, so we're going to evaluate all the playoff teams. And all right, let's start with the AFC, right? Kansas City was definitely run first this year. I know they have Patrick Mahomes, but that was run first, right? It really was. I mean, they would use Xavier Worthy too in the run, Checo, Hunt, whatever. They would just run the fucking ball first. Even the Bills, when they fired Dorsey, they went more run, right? Whether it was Josh Allen with his legs or James Cook. And actually, that's probably the thing that killed them in the game plan against the Chiefs was that they veered away from James Cook.
Yep.
And controlling the clock, right? Ravens. I mean, that was maybe the most run heavy team we've ever seen, right? I mean, like, okay, then who else we've got? Division winners. Mixon was the driving force for Houston, right? He really was, right? And obviously the injuries played a part in that, but their most successful run when everything was healthy was running the ball. And everyone's like, oh, CJ Stroud had a down year. And no, it's because they went run heavy, right?
Pittsburgh he got slow and fired, so I don't.
Right. Pittsburgh was run first. Pittsburgh was run first, right? Chargers were run first, right? And the Broncos were a mix, but they started run first, right?
I think Detroit as well.
Just the AFC, right? That all run first, right?
But it is hard to kind of pin that down too, because like if you look at the run pass splits, that doesn't tell you the real picture, because a lot of teams that suck have to pass a lot because they're down. It's not because they're not good.
It's controlling the clock and the game and the tempo.
But so here's what I think. What I think the Jets really need, right, is run heavy, pass heavy, whatever, man. I want them to have a modern offense, right? Like Sean McVay's running game, Kyle Shanahan's running game, Andy Reid's running game. It's a futuristic offense, right? Where the Jets are still running a 2006 West Coast offense, right? So when you talk about like more of a modern offense, it doesn't mean throwing the ball a bunch and, putting
it means throwing effectively.
Right, exactly. And in order to throw effectively, I think you need to be able to run the ball, because once that sets up play action, especially if you're bringing Aaron Rodgers back, it's huge. But their run game was so stagnant last year because it was old concepts. It was stuff that defensive coordinators have figured out for 10 years. Right.
So in the NFC real quick, the only teams that were passed first really were Minnesota, and I guess you could argue the Bucks, although they had a double threat at running.
No, I mean, but that's
what are you doing to determine that exactly?
I'm just thinking like what the game plan, right? Like, I mean, Rams were really a run first team this year, right? They really were. Like they leaned on Williams the whole year, right? Obviously Saquon, that was run first, right? I mean, Detroit, we have to talk about that, right? Washington was run first too, even with Jaden Daniels using his legs, right? The Packers got what's his face Jacobs, so they could be run first, and they were, right? They didn't really have a 1,000-yard receiver or anything like that, right? So they're a run first team, right? Like that's kind of how I'm just doing it by eyeball. Like, well, what where they were going, and even that makes sense too with LaFleur, right? When Rodgers got his MVPs, they were still pretty much trying to be a run first team, right?
Yeah. I mean, the Lions were pretty much a 50-50 split. It's
they had fucking monsters running the ball.
Well, I think, Monty, to your point, right, you had said it a million times during the season, right? If the Jets can run the ball the way the Lions ran it and then use that to set up the passing game to Garrett Wilson, hopefully Tyler Warren, who I wanted to take at 7, we'll talk about that later. But, if you can do that kind of stuff, have that two-headed monster at running back, if that's something that this offensive staff and Aaron Glenn bring to the Jets, then, I mean, we don't have anything to complain about, right? We just have to be effective on the field. But if that's the mentality and the structure of the offense, can't complain with that.
I agree. Anyway, do we want to go to final thoughts, I guess?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. I don't have the banner ready, so just whatever. Monty.
Just whatever. Yeah, man. So, we're making headway. We're making some nice progress here with the coaches. I am, again, like Adnan says, cautious optimism, broke out the Jets shirt yet. I'm not ready to put the jersey on yet, but I will.
The Turbulence swag.
Yeah, that I'll put on. But
do you have it?
No, I don't. But when it comes down to, you gonna interrupt me more or what, man? It was final thoughts or no final thoughts? We doing final thoughts?
Okay. Final thoughts.
Then. Yes, thank you. So anyway, see, now I forgot what I was saying. No, anyway, we're making headway with coaching. We're putting together a good team here from a coaching perspective. GM is taken care of. Now all that's left is the OC. I'm just really, 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 really hoping that we nail that. We have to. We really, really have to. But Glenn, I wanted to talk about a little bit because I didn't get to, but I'm actually warming up to him severely, even though he was, not necessarily my first choice, just because, like I said, I want an offensive-minded coach. I think offensive-minded coaches are kind of where the league's going, what the league's doing, and who's being successful, in this league. So that's what I want for the Jets. Plus, I just haven't seen it. Like, I haven't seen a powerhouse offense Jets in my lifetime, and I want to see it. You know what I mean? I just want to see it. I want to see the Jets win, obviously, but I want to see the Jets light it up. You know what I mean? Like, it's cool to be great on defense, and that's fun and all that, but score some fucking points too. What's wrong with that? I would like to see that in my lifetime. So hopefully we can go that route, but ultimately, first things first, let's get this staff together and let's win some fucking football games. Go Jets.
Yeah, I think I agree with, a lot of what you said there, Monty. And I think the thing for me with all of this is, again, I think it's important that it looks like it's a really fresh start, no holdovers. It looks like it's going to be kind of the same thing in the front office. I know that Phil Savage, did a job, as the interim GM, and there's talk about could he be back. I just want a fresh start. No disrespect to any of those guys, even though we've torn them up a lot. But a fresh start is needed for this organization, right? And if you're not going to get a fresh start at the ownership level, let's get a fresh start everywhere else that they can, right? And bring in a whole new front office, bring in a whole new coaching staff. You're bringing in coaches that, are from successful places. And it's crazy to say that about Detroit because 7 years ago, they were a joke, right? Now you're looking at Detroit as a successful place that kind of rose from the ashes, which is what we want for the Jets. So Aaron Glenn has seen that. And I think it's again, cautiously optimistic, a cautiously optimistic start to this hiring cycle. We'll see, when we get the OC news, we'll see who else they bring in. I'm hearing or reading whatever that Todd Haley is a guy that could come in as like a senior offensive assistant. Wouldn't hate that. I think bringing in as much experience as you can will really help an inexperienced head coach. So it sounds like they're trying to do all the right things. So we'll see how it plays out. But right now, I probably couldn't be happier with where they go. And, I think we'll have some more news to talk about next week. But it's been interesting, and I will have my swag hopefully for next week. So I will be wearing our podcast hoodie.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'd like to congratulate Mekhi Becton and Bryce Huff for getting to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Especially Mekhi Becton because, if he was a more notable position, he could be a comeback player of the year candidate, right? He's been really good. He's been really, really fucking good in that role at guard. Saquon got so many fucking holes behind that fucking guy. He's such a big man. I miss that big ticket. Bryce Huff hasn't done much, but he's getting more pressure now lately, and they're using him very situationally, which is interesting. I could see him being a cut candidate after this year if he doesn't show up in the Super Bowl. And then us just getting him back, which would be fucking amazing, right? There's promise in this time of the year with the Jets, right? Everything's looking new. We're like, we're going to do this. We're going to be better. I kind of believe Aaron Glenn a little bit more than all the other guys that have come in just because he's had success as a Jet being a fucking amazing corner, right? And also, I just love all the support that's been coming around from all the ex-Jets players. Like Winker Bet did it. I guess a quick first
podcast,
thoughts, right? Yeah, with Sabo. And then there was a bunch of Jets too that were at his his introductory press conference, right? I saw Mangold was there, Woody was Damien Woody was there, right? There's a couple guys that were there, right? So there's love for Aaron Glenn, also being a very smaller corner that played big, right? So that's I'm happy that he's home. Maybe this is what breaks the Jets curse that exists that Adnan refuses to acknowledge.
I'm gonna stop this recording right now.
I don't think you can because you don't have the fucking swag. And also, I'm not looking forward to this Super Bowl like I used to with most, just because these teams fucking just. I want the Eagles to win. We can talk about that next week as the game gets closer, because I just can't stand the fucking Chiefs. I would put fuck the Chiefs on there, but Adnan's for the Chiefs for some fucking weird reason. But anyway, just remember this, guys. These guys, they're getting their swag. I expect you to do the same.
Laugh Through the Turbulence swag is now live and ready to make you look as good as Aaron Rodgers throwing a deep ball. Click in the bio to find out where to buy it. Get yours today and rep the green and white in style. And remember, wearing this swag doesn't make you look awesome. Actually, it increases our odds of the Jets winning. Well, maybe not, but it can't hurt to say that, right? Made probably from the finest child sweatshops from around the world that we do not endorse but still appreciate. Buy our swag today. We're giving you free content. Now it's time to empty your pockets and buy the stuff you don't need. Don't have a job? Well, you've got a kidney, right? Sell it and buy our swag. See if that's this old lady with a purse? Take her purse and pawn it and use the money to buy our swag. Got some money tucked away for your kid's college fund? Empty the account and buy our swag, because your kid is just going to waste that money on a gender studies major anyway. Buy our fucking swag, dude!